Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Interval. Today I'm going to be chatting to Richard Reynoso, who is a classical builder out in Los Angeles, California. His work is just impeccable and I really think you'll enjoy this episode. So let's get started.
Well, can I just first say congratulations on doing such nice work.
Oh, dude, thank you.
And creating I don't want to say brand. Well, I guess you could say brand, but just an aesthetic, a look that is your own. With the amount of guitar makers out there, I think it can be challenging to set yourself apart. I mean, there's a lot of great guitar makers that make great sounding guitars, but it's the looks that you gotta also grab them, So congrats on creating that.
Thank you so much. It's I mean, the reason I'm talking to you right now is because I feel exactly the same about your work. I don't know. I don't know. My knowledge of classical instruments is limited, but from following your work for quite some time, even if I didn't always associate the name with what I was seeing, the visual language was so strong that I was like, man, whoever's doing that work, it's so good. It's always so striking.
Thank you. Well, to my point, how can I get recognized? If there's so many guitar makers that are making really nice sounding guitars, and people, so much is on the internet and social media. People in a way kind of buy with their eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and you hope that if something looks stunning, that it sounds really good too. So I come from an art background. I like visuals, and so it came natural for me to find my own aesthetic or look.
So when you say that you come from an art background, let's expand on that. What do you tell me a little bit about that? What do you mean by that?
Well, I just grew up in the arts. I remember I was like 7 or 8 years old and sitting at the kitchen table in Santa Monica, and I drew this figure, and I knew I did really well. And I thought to myself, when I grow up, I'm going to be an artist. And so, I had always been attracted to music and was always drawing and math and sciences and history just never appealed to me. Maybe because it was forced. I also grew up in a Catholic household, having to do this. I rebelled. And so music and art and getting involved with music classes and art classes and through high school and college, but by no means was I ever planning on pursuing music. But I am in the music industry, but just in a complete different way than when you think of being in music. You think about being in a band or playing in writing music. That just sounds like suicide to me. Although guitar making is definitely a sacrifice, as you may know.
Totally.
Lifestyle.
Totally.
I mean, it's definitely a lifestyle. It's a unique profession.
You are not wrong. You are not wrong there. It's I say that quite a lot, and I guess it's something that kind of occurred to me recently. Just how much you use the word lifestyle. Like that is how I feel about guitar making. And I think, I was talking to a luthier, Nicole Elosenak, a couple of weeks ago, and we said the same thing. I think, if you really want to excel at something, I feel like it has to be a lifestyle.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I live in my shop. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but I eat, breathe, sleep this stuff, and yeah, you know, I just I dabble in other kind of creative outlets from time to time. I sing in a choir right now. You know, I grew up playing the guitar, but you know, people ask me like, oh, do you ever feel inspired to make something else, like furniture or anything like that? But the thing is in how I am, I'm so detail oriented,
Sure.
and such a perfectionist that in order for me to be the best I can at my work is like I have to devote myself to it. You know, like if I were to spread my energy among a number of different things, like, well, okay, well, I'd probably be good at them, but I probably wouldn't be an expert. I probably wouldn't be, you know, top notch. So, and, you know, to the day that I die, I'll be trying my best to be the best guitar maker I can. You know, it's such a, yeah, brain's a little foggy right now, but
hey, it's 10 a.m. on a Sunday. It's all
yeah,
good.
well, no, it's just like where I want to go. Like what I want to say is, it's just such a challenging art form, and I think it's such that's what makes it so interesting. I've been doing this now for like 20 years, and you know, there are guitars where I just feel like I know what I'm doing. You know, and then there are times where it's like a guitar maybe lacks some sustain in some areas, or it's just not doing exactly what I want it to do, and then, you know, just like, okay, I don't have it figured out. There's a saying, I guess, like when you feel that you know everything and you realize, I'm botching it, but when you realize that you feel you know something, you then learn you don't know anything at all, something like that.
Sure. The more that you know, the more you realize you don't know. Or
Exactly.
Something like,
yeah.
So
yeah. So, you know, it's I love learning about this, and when I build a guitar that I'm happy with, but I was just like, you know, why is it doing this or why is it doing that? I like scratch my head and I start seeking knowledge and talking to different luthiers or friends, and you know, this is what keeps us up at night.
Totally.
I mean, you studied with Irving Samaji.
That's right.
So that must have been quite an experience, huh?
Absolutely, and you know, Irvin is a prime example of somebody who, you know, objectively speaking, has kind of reached, you know, the pinnacle of his career in terms of, you know, the accolades and the recognition and the quality of the work, and you know, he writes extensively about the subject, but you know, even at kind of in his mid-70s, you know, he's in the shop 6 days a week, and he's still experimenting, and he's still somebody who is always trying new things and always kind of rewriting the rule book, which is kind of is inspiring. It's deeply humbling, and it's exciting. You know, I remember when I was starting, or I kind of first suggested to some of my colleagues when I was furniture making that I was going to venture into acoustic guitar making. One of the things that I heard quite a lot was, do you not think you'll get bored building the same thing every day? And I that couldn't be any further from the reality of what it is that we do. You know, you were saying before how the guitar is such a challenging art form, because of course it's not just the aesthetics, it's not just the kind of visual creativity, but it's the fact that it's this dynamic system and a deeply complicated system that really makes it so exciting.
Exactly. Yeah, that's better put than I put it. Yeah.
Well, it's it's
very complex. Yeah.
Deeply complex, and like you say, that's what kind of keeps us awake at night, and certainly the light bulb moments that I feel that I get with guitars at kind of a relatively early stage in my career are just can be so profound, but also, as you were saying, there's sometimes when you're building and a guitar might not have the quality that you'd hoped for, and you're left with this kind of feeling of, oh, I thought I did everything right. Yeah, why does this not sound great?
Start noodling around, start shaving braces, and you measuring tap tones and measuring frequencies, and okay, I see a change. But then the next day, the humidity in your shop is a little bit different, and it might, change the air a little bit, and it's just, it's really funny.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I was saying before, my experience with the classical guitar is very, very limited, but I expect that
with the same principles.
Completely, but I'm thinking about the sensitivity of the instrument. Being a much more lightly constructed instrument as a function of there being less tension.
Sure.
They must be much more susceptible to, like you say, climatic changes in the workshop from one moment to the next.
Yeah, for example, so my fan braces, I plane them flat, and I press them into my Solera, which is a mold.
Sure.
So because I do that, I think they're more susceptible to humidity change. A friend of mine, guitar maker of mine, he shapes the bottom of his fan braces, and he finds that there's not as much fluctuation in the way that the tom, if there's more humidity, the top might expand up a little bit, or the action might change a little bit. And so, I was taught from he's passed on now, Eugene Clark.
Sure.
And he really strong advised to glue flat braces into it, press them into a mold, glue them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So it does create a little bit more tension in the top, and stiffness. So, but I mean, these braces that I'm gluing, they're not necessarily tall. I wouldn't advise a tall transverse brace and trying to force your will upon that. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your kind of start and your beginnings in lutherie. I'm really kind of interested to, because you're in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, I'm in Hollywood. I'm
right
by the Griffith Observatory.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So
have you ever been here?
I have a couple of times. Yeah. It's a
okay.
place that I'd like to explore more. And kind of really get under the skin of LA. I feel like it's
be careful there.
Right. It's definitely somewhere that I'd like to spend a little bit more time, and there's quite a few builders that I know in LA that I would like to visit, yourself included. So
steel string.
Well, yeah, I mean, Isaac Jang. I don't know if you're familiar with his.
Yeah.
He's right by you, right?
Yeah, he's just a 10-minute bike ride from me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, did you say you grew up in the area?
I grew up in Santa Monica.
Okay.
Yeah, Santa Monica is by the beach, on the west side.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so why classical guitars? Why did that come from?
Oh, well, why classical guitars? Well, I grew up loving music, and my dad is not a musician, but he always had music playing, as well as my mom. But my dad would take me to school, and he had a couple tapes. I mean, he'd be playing the Beatles, but he also had a couple tapes, classical guitar music from like Julian Bream and John Williams. And so, that was in the background. I would hear that. And I don't know where my attraction to the guitar came. I know I was my first two albums were U2 Joshua Tree and Bon Jovi New Jersey, which is so bad. I was like sixth grade, but I was really attracted to the guitar, and I was getting more involved with rock music and then heavy metal, and my dad scoffed at that stuff. He was just saying, that's not music. You should play classical guitar. Listen to this. This is music. My taste for music and playing the guitar continually evolved, and it eventually brought me to like classical music in my late teens, early 20s, and I borrowed a classical guitar from one of my best friends, and I started falling in love with classical music, and just started playing and fell in love with it. I was just attracted to a number of things about the classical guitar. The sound, of course. Mm-hmm. Also just the fact that you can play an instrument where you don't need a band. Your accompaniment is your thumb or your other fingers. And so I fell in love with the classical guitar, and my friend had said, hey, I need that guitar back. I'm going to sell it. And so I gave it back to him. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to look for a new guitar. And, I think whatever it is that you find interested in, you start poking around and realize that, this is a big world. And I learned that these guitars were made by people.
Sure, yeah.
Not by machines, but like guitar makers, like just living, well, I don't know about living out of their shop, but building these guitars by hand. And I had no woodworking experience. I was always good with my hands, building things, making things, but it was a little bit daunting to actually, let me back up. So I started researching classical guitars, and the prices started going up, as the guitars mm-hmm. get better, and I finally, bought a guitar, but also knew that there were people making these guitars, and that really attracted me. It was like a lifestyle. I remember there was this. Do you know Simon Marty? He's an Australian classical guitar maker, and I remember reading an article, and he was like, yeah, I wake up in the morning, I go surf, for an hour, I come back, and then I start working in the shop.
Nice.
And then I'll take a break, take a coffee, maybe go surf a little bit, and come back. And I just thought, wow, that's so cool. Yeah. To be immersed in art and acoustics, and design and music, but also like take a break and do what you want to do, whether mm-hmm. it be surfing or whichever. So that's also another thing that attracted me about this business, but this craft, this art is just being your own man or person, and relying on yourself and just being immersed in something creative like this. Yeah, so this was in my early 20s, and I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And I was in art. I was drawing, I was painting, and, I did well. I knew I was good at it, but I just wasn't, when I'd get home from school, I wasn't home painting and drawing. I was listening to music or playing guitar or hanging out with friends. So you kind of had to force me to do art. But this voice, behind me was saying, I was thinking about guitar making, but also I was thinking about conducting, like orchestras. I was like, oh, like I don't see myself being a classical guitarist, but really interested in classical music and conducting. And I went to Austria, with the dream of maybe studying there, conducting or something. But also at the back of my head, I had this guitar making idea. And I think all along I knew guitar making was the easier path, because with conducting or music I would have to devote years and years of schooling, and
Got it.
that didn't appeal to me. But yeah, so I just started poking around, reaching out to different guitar makers around the world, some in England, so, just all over. I was just dreaming about having some type of an apprenticeship. And again, like I had no woodworking experience, but I knew that I would excel in it, and that wood was just another medium, to master or to learn.
Sure.
Yeah, so I found a guitar maker here in Los Angeles. His name is Greg Brandt. And,
Sure. Yeah.
And he took me on, and that's really the start of, where I am now. That's where it really kind of started. When I started studying with him, it was with the intention of pursuing guitar making as a career. It was so clear to me, and as you're in school or in college or in high school, you're thinking like, oh, what am I going to do with my life? That eternal question, and I remember getting down on myself, like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then I figured it out at around 22, 23. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh man, I discovered it at such a young age. I'm sorry, late age. I thought it was like, God, I'm really behind. And I'm 42 now, and I look back and I meet people my age, and they're still trying to figure out what to do. So
Totally, yeah.
So basically, I discovered it at a very young age. I guess I just had romanticized that it would have been nice to really like grown up in the art. Like I'd be that much better if I had begun early. So yeah. So after 20 years of building, there are days where I'm just scratching my head and thinking like, what? I don't understand. I don't understand. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit specifically about your aesthetic, which is something that I'm just completely mesmerized by. I just kind of blows me away, just in terms of the thoughtfulness behind it, but also the execution, which is just exquisite. Let's talk a little bit about where that element of your building comes from, and when did you kind of find that niche that you've kind of created for yourself?
Well, that's a good question. I cannot help what I'm attracted to. I find shapes or designs or patterns that appeal to me, and somehow they just make their way through me and then out onto the page, or to my noggin. So I've always been attracted to more angular lines and squares and rectangles, perhaps because they're easier to fit. Like it just makes sense. But yeah, like we all find inspiration in shapes or designs, and my designs are just a culmination of things that have kind of already done before. The shapes are already out there. The designs have
Sure.
already been made, you know. But, you know, like, through that process, our own personality comes through. And I'm very hard on myself. I'm also very much a perfectionist. So, yeah, I've always been really interested in detail. And that perfectionism, I think they go hand in hand. But it's really hard to say, like, where well, your question was, I'm getting all jumbled up here.
That's okay. It's a big question. Yeah, it's a difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult. I just find shapes or designs that I see in and around me, you know, and I like lines that are radiating out. I like rectangles and squares, and Art Deco, of course, does appeal to me. But then sometimes I look at Art Deco and I mean, it's a variation on a theme that I'm doing. But you know, it's a lot of fun, and I the art side in me, the artist in me, has set the challenge of always changing things up visually. Which, if you want to make a living, it takes up so much time. And do you know how many times I make it in my head? I see it and I draw it out on paper, and then when I actually finish it, I didn't see that coming, or I didn't see that color popping out, or that shape.
Sure.
And then you scrap it, you know. It fulfills that artist's creative side in me to
Absolutely.
be creating different shapes and designs. The whole acoustic aspect and frequencies and all that stuff, and shaping braces and all that, that's another side of changing things up and experimenting. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think so. I think, you know, for me, when I look at your design work, especially, you know, primarily your rosettes and the details that you do on the heel cap, you know, I see something that is very much rooted in the tradition in terms of how it's constructed or the kind of execution. But there's also this, you know, this Art Deco idea going on with the kind of colors and the proportion, but also there's this almost like futurism going on. It's got this look as if it's like way out into the future. It's very very modern, like ultra modern, but to my eye,
in the rosette style of
the kind of tiles and the
exactly. Yeah.
Which is really nice. I really appreciate that, and I guess I wondered how, you know, from my understanding of the classical guitar and the kind of classical world, it seems to me to be quite resistant to anything too far away from tradition. Is that something that you kind of butt up against, or do you find people that really embrace you and your work because of?
Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about, like, if you find a design that works with you. Classical guitar has kind of been that way, you know, where it's like, oh, tradition, like it's like the Bible, like you don't stray away. Well, you know, like, hey, we're all individuals and we all have our own thoughts and ideas and creativity, and why not express ourselves, you know? Steel string, and you guys have always been a little looser and allowed to explore. Well, we're allowed, you know? So yeah, no, no one has ever really, never had any resistance from it. You know, to each their own. If someone doesn't like something, you know, like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I've been really lucky to find designs that appeal to other people, and so when I get commissioned, they kind of allow me to do what I want to do, because they're already kind of sold on my vision.
Sure.
And of course they make requests, and I'll accommodate, or I'll do the best that I can to find a happy medium.
In terms of your one thing that always strikes me, you post quite a lot on Instagram. You do a lot of Instagram stories and kind of chronicle your.
It takes up a lot of time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know it, but it's absolutely fascinating to watch, and it's really it's beautifully done. You have a great way with lighting and really kind of setting a really nice scene whenever you do these little videos. And one thing. Well, thank you.
Which is one of my favorites. On a Monday morning, that will wake you up. I mean, it's comical. It's funny. It's yeah.
Yeah, no, we have fun with that. But one of the things that I really like about watching your Instagram stories, and if anyone hasn't seen them, I really encourage them to seek them out. Is there seems to be a very, I don't know quite how to put this, but your working style is very. You talk about being a perfectionist, and it's evident in the way that you set about doing your work. Every movement seems to be very, very deliberate and very precise, and it's kind of, I think yesterday or the day before you were doing some binding work, and whether or not it's kind of muscle memory or whether it's just deliberate and thought about. It's very kind of you pick the brush up and it's into the glue pot, and then just one smooth motion into the binding, and it's very, very controlled, and it's just very mesmerizing to watch.
Oh, I get to control what you see.
Well, sure.
We get to control what the audience sees. You don't see like what like you don't. Yeah.
But on top of that, it strikes me that you seem to be working in a very time-honoured fashion, and from a very kind of, again, traditional standpoint. Lots of hand tools, lots of handwork, and kind of very deliberate, meticulous hand skills. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. But also, I rely, in order for me to do the quality of work that I do, I need to have a clean shop. It just needs to be really, I mean, I live here, I sleep here,
Mm-hmm.
and like a clean space, clean mind, and it takes a lot of time and energy to make these instruments and to be as clean as possible. And so I make mistakes all the time. I just don't show them.
Sure.
And I've had to redo things. And there's this little part in my brain like, oh, just let it go. Like, don't be such a perfectionist. But if this is the last instrument that I'm going to build, like, it better be the best it possibly can. It's like the guitars that I'm building guitars for the concert level musician. For that, but also it could be found in a museum. And I bring a lot of pride and joy in doing a good job. And I a lot of handwork, but also, like my peg head. Like, I have all this bevel work, and it is all done by hand. But I build jigs, or I build tools to allow my plane to run on a straight line, to be able to give me straight bevels. Because I want a straight line.
Yeah.
you know, my hand, like, okay, I'll get close, but I rely on tools that I made that act as guides, you know, as guides to give me a straight line. And the same for my rosette work, you know, like I'm not, you know, for like tile work, how they may go around a circle, like I'm not relying like the old masters used to do, rely on a chisel to give me that taper to be able to fit them around. No, I rely on guides, you know, tools and jigs that I've to get me that precision. Who, you know, are they the master because they could do it by hand? Well, or am I because I've created these things to? Well, I don't know if it's cheating, but.
No, I absolutely don't think it's cheating. I think I think it's more important than ever now. I think, you know, we live in a world where we're exposed to so much more, or we have the ability to see so many more people doing their work, and we get so much more insight into other makers' work, and not only us as builders, but really also helpful. It is really helpful, but it also means that there's more impetus to do the finest work that we can, because if we don't, there are plenty of other people doing just as nice work and better, and you know, potential clients see that, and you know, and so I think you
guys have it really challenging with steel string clients. Talking with Isaac Jang and you know him, how he selects tops and how he looks at tops, and like just the little, like if there's like just a little blemish in the top, he'll, you know, he's like, no, I don't want to use it. Like the steel string clientele are I feel maybe far more pickier than classical, but the classical is getting up there with pickiness.
Yeah, I think you know, I started in my starting woodwork was in fine furniture making, and you know, I thought that world was picky and particular, but moving over to the guitar, heck no.
Well, yeah, the thing is like if people are paying this amount of money, it better be the best effing instrument, you know, sure. And looking. Absolutely, but you know, the thing is like we are okay, I can only speak for myself, but all the cleanliness and the detail, like that makes me happy. And we hope that others out there will see that and appreciate it and say like, oh, this person is very good at what he does or she does. But they pick up that guitar, you know, oh, it looks nice, brum, brum, you know, feels good. Like they probably never ever look at the butt of the guitar or the miters and all that stuff. And I mean, that's okay. You know, we build guitars that will appeal to the collector, but also the great musicians.
Do you know, it's funny. I was working on a guitar recently, and one of mine. I was building a guitar, and I spent a preposterous amount of time doing an end graft. You know. It was one of the most challenging things that I'd done, and took me far too long to do it. And
was it like a request from a client, or is just something you wanted to do? Or?
It was something that I thought, oh, that'll be nice. That'll kind of tie everything together. And it was something that I wanted to just experiment with. And you know, so I finished the woodwork on that, you know, a couple of months ago. I sent the guitar away to get its lacquer finish, and then I picked it up the other day, and I was playing it and you know, enjoying the guitar after I'd set it up.
So you play guitar?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But I picked up the guitar, rotated it to see the end graft, and it surprised me. Like I'd forgotten that I'd done this end graft, because it's like this thing that you hardly ever see, you know.
Do you mean the tail piece? Like
sure, yeah.
You mean
yeah.
the butt of the guitar? The
exactly,
tail, like
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So you'd forgotten about it.
I'd just completely forgotten that I'd done this end graft, and you know, just kind of going off what you were saying about.
You're a busy man.
So
you've got other things going on in there, like yeah.
But so it's kind of funny, you know. I think about all the attention to detail that we kind of go into, and the kind of the stress that we put ourselves under trying to get everything absolutely perfect, and this moment of realization that I'd forgotten that I'd done this piece of work just kind of reminded me that, you know, sometimes there's a line, you know, there's a point at which, as luthiers, we perhaps go way beyond where we actually need to, in search of this kind of perfection, but also self satisfaction, and you know, perhaps it kind of works its way back into a holistic end product. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking out loud now, but it's interesting.
I do that all the time.
It's it's interesting that the lengths that we go to, and
do you ever have an emotional connection to any of your instruments, or like you don't want to let it go, or you're sad to see it go, or are you happy? Like, okay, go. Like, I'm done here.
Oh, totally. Yeah. There are some guitars that you know, I just don't resonate with me, perhaps.
That's a good word. I use that a lot.
Yeah.
That sounds bad. All the guitars that I'm building don't resonate with me, but yeah. But
then and you know, I think if you're building for somebody, then you know it's an instrument that you're building for somebody else. So there's perhaps no reason why it should resonate with you on a complete level. But then, of course, there are some guitars where perhaps a client has just allowed you to do what you want to do, and you end up with this instrument that you finish and you're like, wow, I love this. Like. Yeah. And there's one particular guitar that I built I think last year, 18 months ago, and I built it with a top that I'd got from Julian Gaffney, who I apprenticed with at Irvin Samodzi's shop, and the back and sides were a gift from Irvin, and so this particular guitar, you know, had a personal significance to me, but also I just love the sound of it, and so it went overseas. It went to a client in New York, and yeah, I've kind of never heard anything about that guitar since, and I miss it.
Yeah,
you know,
I've had that experience where I really loved a guitar and it flies away, and you don't hear from the client. You know it's a damn good guitar, but you don't hear from the client. You don't know where it is, you know, and yeah.
But it's So yeah, to answer the question in a very long-winded fashion, some guitars I do develop a really strong bond with, and others, you know, I love them, but you know, they're for somebody else. You know, they're not for me.
Are you using, what kind of spruces are you using? Are you European, Engelmann, Sitka, or do you? You know,
I use a bit of everything. Every guitar that I build seems to be built from something different.
It keeps you on your toes.
Totally. I think
and it keeps things interesting. Yeah.
It totally does. You know, each piece of wood is different, and you know, that's just within species. You know, as soon as you start deviating, and it kind of really keeps you on your toes, and yeah, keeps things interesting. So, you know, right now, I just took a delivery of some really nice Italian spruce, which I really, really like.
Do you monitor? Do you like? like measure like Young's modulus and density and all that stuff?
You know, when I was working with Irvin, he was very much of the kind of school of, you know, you'll thickness something and you'll tap a piece of wood until it feels right, you know, and he was always about just thicknessing like hundreds of tops and just getting a feel for when something is right. And that's kind of how I work.
So intuition.
Yeah, you know, I'll kind of get something to where it feels right, and then I'll take a measurement just to kind of confirm or for document exactly. Yeah. And you know, if I'm feeling particularly meticulous, I'll maybe take some deflection measurements for documentation purposes. But largely, I'm kind of doing things by feel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that. Sometimes, like going back to what I was talking about, like sometimes when I build a guitar, like the guitar is really nice, but I wish I had this or I wish I had that, and it brings me to wanting to learn, you know. And I start, like I said, talking to people or just trying to figure out why the guitar is doing what it's doing. And so, more and more, you know, I've been really interested in measuring frequencies, you know, through like some spectral analyzer. I do deflection tests and measure density, but I think just wanting to learn, you know, and possibly investing in, you know, more of a scientific approach. I would just I would just like to have the know-how, rather than like I might come to a point where like I learn how to, you know, measure the, well, I already do that now, but you know, to be able to measure the frequencies of the guitar and see where they lie, and like, okay, if I shave this brace or if I do this, that it will bring this down, might bump this up. All that is like really fascinating to me, and I do a little bit of that now, but I don't have a strong grasp of it, and so it pushes me to talk to guitar makers, seasoned guitar makers, whatever season, season building much longer than I have, with more knowledge and experience, and I'm wanting to learn these techniques, and at the end of the day, I'll learn them, and I may not even apply them to my work. I might just resort back to just relying on my intuition, and that's pretty much what I've been doing for 20 years. Is a mixture of luck and intuition, and so it's nice to hear someone like yourself, like, yeah, you rely on intuition, and I've talked to other guitar makers that rely on that and build fantastic instruments. It's also just fun to learn and learn new techniques and have a better understanding. And if you don't have a thirst for acquiring knowledge or understanding your craft, well, I think I don't know. I could just speak for myself.
I agree with what you're saying, and you know, perhaps for a little bit of context on my end of things, somebody recently lent me Trevor Gore's book. Oh
gosh, I have that book.
It's a fabulously well thought out and complete tomb. You know, this book is they've covered every tiny detail, and as you know, it's split into two books on building and the design and build. And honestly, the design side of things, all the formulas and the mathematics and the physics just go way over my head. But it's
here.
Good.
I was like,
it's useful to for me. What was fascinating about it wasn't if I think about this ratio and I think about this, if I apply this formula to this and da da da. what was really useful for me was it got me to think about things that I hadn't previously been considering. And that's not to say that now I apply all those things, but like you say, it's about learning and being open to these other ideas and other things that perhaps you may not have considered, which may or may not then go into it's about building a solid foundation, right? You know, the more you learn, the stronger your foundation, deeper your foundation.
And being able to and believe me, there are many very like much smarter people out there than me, you know, that have far more knowledge than I will ever have. But it would also be nice to be able to have a conversation, to be able to speak the same language and to be able to understand what they're saying and propose, you know, questions. And so that's what, you know, why I'm interested in, you know, that avenue of the physics and the sciences.
Well, it's interesting that you use the word language and talking about why a guitar does the things that it does and why it performs in a certain way, because obviously an objective, or maybe objective is not the right word, but a language for tone and the characteristics of an instrument, it doesn't really exist. You know, there isn't a commonly agreed upon language beyond the kind of true physics of an instrument and you know, frequency and volume and all these kind of things.
I had a client asking me about sound and maple and this and that, and you know, I only know what I know, and I'm so involved with this art and creating the best possible instrument. And you know, a simple question where like, well, you know, what kind of characteristics are you going to get from a maple guitar? Like, I had to sit back and just like have to reassess like my experience and my knowledge and really come from an honest place to what I think is a maple sound. Well, what is a dry sound? Oh man.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. It's a very esoteric, very personal, idiosyncratic field. You know, it's very difficult to put words to these things that we hear. It's like trying to describe color, or it's trying to. Yeah,
and we want to give people or even ourselves like a good answer, an honest answer, and sometimes sometimes you know, like just saying I don't know is honest and real, and you know.
Yeah, totally. I find what's difficult is quite often it's difficult to wade through the common wisdom, and I use that term very loosely. You know, there are so many things that you can read on the internet, so much opinion presented as fact, that quite often you know, you're having to battle against this kind of perceived idea that, you know, if we're talking about a maple guitar, I've heard plenty of maple guitars that sound really full and rich with overtones and not at all, in inverted commas, dry, you know. So it's
complex, you know.
Yeah, totally.
The composition of the top, the bracing of the top, the density, the stiffness. The same goes for the back. The back influences, you know, the character of the sound. You know, it's just there's so many variables. You know, again, going back to why it's such a beautiful art form.
Absolutely.
You know?
So in terms of your sound, you know, what where are you coming from in terms of building style, bracing, in order to achieve what you consider to consistently be your sound, the sound that you're looking for. And is there anything that you do which is unique to you, and anything that you've kind of come up with, or again are you kind of rooted in the tradition of the classical guitar?
It's a really good question, and I don't necessarily know how to answer it. You know, I do have a sound. I'm lucky because I grew up playing the guitar, and I'm lucky because I spent many hours practicing and developing nice tone, you know, shaping my nails. Mm-hmm. And so my guitars have really have been tailored to what I can get them to do. The shape of, you know, the flesh and the shape of my nails producing a particular sound. Like over the years, I've gotten used to it, you know, and I'm also lucky and fortunate to have players come through and like, oh yeah, this is really nice, and I'm liking what I'm hearing from them as well. I mean, everybody has their own shape or their own sound, and some sound better than others to my ears. You know, I'm trying to build a guitar that is very responsive. I'm trying to build a guitar that is really sensitive to the touch and moves and has character. And so in order for me to get there, it's about me learning the materials and learning the materials and how things are put together. And in the end, it comes a particular sound. So I'm not necessarily, so with that said, I'm not necessarily looking for like a Torres sound or
Sure.
a Hauser sound. There are recordings that I've heard that really appealed to me. Like, for example, Christopher Parkening, an amazing guitarist, beautiful sound, but the guitar itself doesn't appeal to me like if I were to sit with the guitar. I've sat with many Ramirez guitars and played them. The guitar and the musician are so they need each other to have a voice, and so so the Ramirez guitars, like, they don't necessarily appeal to me, but in the right player's hand, they're golden. So going back, like, I'm just trying to produce an instrument that speaks and has character and is sensitive. I mean, we're building instruments with no electronics, and we're trying to create music or sound through natural and raw materials, and through science and physics and acoustics. It's just really fascinating. And so yes, I can probably the sounds that I really like, I'd really have to defer to not necessarily a particular guitar. It'd have to be a guitar and a player. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. It absolutely makes sense, and it's it's interesting. You say that. Well, I completely agree with what you're saying. That it is the guitar and the player. I think of I work with a guitarist called Will McNichol, who's a.
Have you posted stuff with him on Instagram?
Yeah,
the young kid. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
very, very good musician.
He's a fabulous player, and I built a guitar for him, and it's very much, they've kind of grown together, and I don't know what it is. Like, I play his guitar now, and sure, it's opened up, but it's taken on a kind of character of its own that I don't think it would have if Will hadn't been the one playing it for the last, however long. And it's interesting that, you know, two people don't get the same sound out of the same guitar. You know, just with their approach, and as you were saying, whether they're playing with fingers or flesh or nails, it's
like, oh, give me that guitar, let me show you how it sounds. Like no, it doesn't sound like that.
It's fascinating how that goes. But listen, man, we've hit the 1 hour mark.
Okay.
Would you believe? So you know, thank you so much for your time. I always you know, with these podcasts, I kind of get started, and before I know it, an hour has passed, and I feel like I could just talk for hours and hours.
I think we got started like a half an hour ago. I think we started getting but no, thank you for having me.
Well, I always like to finish on a couple of questions. What is one book that you think everybody should read?
Oh, jeez. Well, I don't know how to read, so one book that everyone should read. Oh, okay. I should take that. Wabi Sabi: The Beauty of Imperfection.
That's a great book. I have that book.
I really need to take that advice.
I was going to say that's an interesting choice for you, because of somebody who's so meticulous, and everything is so perfect. The other question that I like to finish on is if we're going to have a fantasy dinner party later, and you're allowed to invite one guest.
Just
one guest. Yeah. Well, okay. You can have two. If you're going to be pushy about it, you can have two. You're allowed to have two. You're allowed to bring two guests, and they can be living or dead. You know, fictional or real. Who do you bring, and why?
Okay. Stan Laurel, from Laurel and Hardy.
Sure.
Laurel and Hardy have been my favorites since I was a kid. I think he's a very comical man. I think it would be really cool to be able to sit at a dinner table with him and chat it up. So Stan Laurel, and last but not least, which is my ultimate favorite composer, is Gustav Mahler. He's an Austrian composer, fantastic composer. Other than he's just a favorite composer of mine. That's my reason.
Fantastic.
Well, let me ask you, who would you have at dinner?
Oh man. You know, I ask this question all the time, and then
when you began to ask it, I knew right away. I was like, "Oh, this good."
I think I would have Leonardo Da Vinci.
Oh, okay.
You know, I think, you know, just the way that his mind seemingly worked, and just all of the different things that he was interested in, and a real kind of true pioneer, I think. And I think I would also have Richard Feynman as well, the physicist. He was, you know, he was a prominent physicist in the kind of, I guess, 60s onwards. No, before he was way before that, but he was a really fascinating guy. Had a very interesting take on life, and was a wonderful teacher as well. You know, able to.
Would he do TV shows? Would he go on like talk shows and people would
absolutely
question him? I know who he is.
You'll know. He's a kind of
dark hair.
I mean, I think he grayed in later life, but he was
and spoke very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I would think a physicist would speak well.
But he great character, and just I think he would be a fantastic person to have at a dinner party. So I would have him.
Nice.
Cool, man. Well, on that note, I'm gonna go make some dinner. Because it's getting on for 6:30 here, so
Well, thanks for this opportunity.
No, the pleasure's all mine, and thank you. It's been really nice to chat to you. I wish we could talk longer, but next time I'm in California, which is looking likely to be this year.
Oh, really?
I'm hoping to do. I'm gonna be in San Diego, and then I'll probably, I'll maybe drive. I'll maybe take a trip up the West Coast, come through LA, and then I'll go visit my old stomping ground in the Bay Area. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to swing by and
absolutely, you're welcome.
Catch up properly and see your shop, and you can show me around Hollywood.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and no doubt we'll speak soon. Keep doing what you're doing, and
likewise. Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
All right.
Take care. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Interval with Richard Reynoso. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed the interview. Hit subscribe, give us 5 stars if you like this episode. Make sure to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Medium, and wherever else you consume content on the internet, because we've got it covered. Until next time.